Welcome to the next chapter of Mina Star, a near-future epic about humanity's reckoning after the collapse of the insane logic of mutually assured destruction, tracing how the ruins of the nation-state order give rise to the Charter, a new consensus-driven civilization built on the principle that every life is sovereign. In this chapter, we follow Kathryn Chambers, a young naval commander who faces an impossible choice during a Baltic crisis with consequences that reverberate through decades, shaping a future defined by fractured alliances and a movement that redefines freedom and power. Blue Judas, Baltic Sea, 2029, USS Anchorage Bay had never been a normal ship. On paper, she was an amphibious assault vessel, but in truth, she was the Navy's first drone mothership, a prototype built to test what the future looked like. Her decks held no strike fighters, only racks of autonomous craft, and an experimental telemetry array meant to endure for months, its signals stitched together through a high-altitude tethered platform that drew the scattered battle space into one coherent field. Because she was experimental, everyone wanted eyes on her. Pro-drone advocates hungered for proof, and skeptics hunted for flaws. Across NATO, engineers tracked her telemetry in real time. Anchorage Bay was meant to be transparent. Instead, she became a witness to the defining military event of her generation. Kathryn Chambers, the youngest commander of her cohort, woke to claxons and the urgent call of Captain to the bridge. All stations, Condition 1. Condition 1 meant full battle stations. Ever since Chicago was nearly nuked, Navy policy held that Condition 1 meant always being armed. Kathryn thought to herself, America's strength has always been our alliances, not armed isolation. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes. The corridor air was dry and cold against her bare feet as she pulled on a jacket and holstered her father's Sig Sauer, P226. She smiled wistfully as the slick metal carried her back to Corpus Christi, to her father's hands teaching her how to seal the pistol against salt and tape the muzzle the summer she turned 12. Kathryn heard her father's voice say, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." Red floodlights pulsed as she stepped onto the bridge. Status? Lieutenant Commander Rafael Mendoza, silver at the temples, was as steady as the black hills that had raised him. Kathryn smiled at the memory of how they butt heads because of his resentment of being passed over for a green commander, but over time, she earned his respect. He looked up from the plot. Our tethered lighter-than-air platform is 5 kilometers above us, peering over the horizon, watching the Russians mass in the Baltic. Washington still calls it a false alarm, but last night, every Eastern Sentinel F-35 tripped a cloud-based logistics software bug. Until Lockheed clears it, the jets are stuck basically in training mode, like flying bricks. Kathryn felt a sharp, icy spike and thought, can't be a coincidence. The same anxious undercurrent ran through the bridge. In her mind, she heard her father's voice, the old frogman, steady and insistent. Don't lose the initiative, Kathryn. She steadied herself and cut the current with crisp orders. Communications. Report the moment the Lockheed geniuses fix their glitch. Helm. Bring us 3 miles closer to shore and slow to half. Tactical. Ready the Valkyries. Thermobaric drones only if Russian swarms cross the red line. Engineering. Confirm telemetry is steady and report back. She turned last to the Marines at their post. Cupcakes. They bristled at the nickname, annoyance flashing, but still snapped to attention. Keep us safe, and if any Russians come through that hatch, stop them cold. A chorus of aye aye. Captain snapped back, crisp and unified. The gentle ribbing bled the edge from the room until Kathryn heard the drone team saying, "Contact! Glide bombs inbound!" When the Russians surged into the Suwalki Gap, it began with glide bombs hurled safely hidden behind the horizon. 40,000 NATO troops, Americans among them, were being chewed to pieces. Over the tactical net, Kathryn heard the ground units begging for air cover, their voices ragged and breaking in static against the steady hum of consoles and the pulse of red lights on her bridge. Kathryn heard people screaming and pleading. "People are dying. Where's the air screen?" Kathryn leaned forward and said sharply, Signal 6 Fleet. Request current tasking authority and release on air defense and strike. The comms officer snapped back. Aye, aye, Captain. Mendoza stood at her shoulder, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Kathryn thought to herself, his son is down there. He looked carved in stone, but she caught the white of his knuckles on the console rail. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, detached, and edged with iron. We're watching them die without cover, and all we can do is sit here. Gripens and Typhoons scrambled, but most of the Eastern Sentinel's fighters were F-35s. Russian S-400 batteries in Kaliningrad, deep inside Europe's security perimeter like a cancer, lit up any AWACS forcing the big birds to turn back. The infamous Ghost Squadron waited on Polish runways, hot and ready, but every cockpit showed the same cold message. Authentication fail. The bug had caged NATO's primary defensive screen, its air power. Kathryn's jaw clenched, knowing the jets were shackled, controls sluggish and weapons dead. This wasn't an accident. It stank of a political appointee's hand. She remembered the Lockheed rep's promise of full sovereignty transfer, a lie. No partner had ever been granted a code audit of Odin's core, the F-35's cloud-based sustainment and mission software. Any anomaly in the system forced the jets into lockout. The sovereignty transfer was only on paper. Everyone knew the plumbing still ran through Washington. The tactical officer called out, "Captain, Captain, British pilots are on the move." They forced overrides, lit burners, and launched anyway. Their jets screamed into the night, but with performance capped and weapons locked, they were flying fast targets. Commander Evelyn Carter reporting, "Take off the training wheels and unlock the damn targeting software." Her voice tight but firm. An Anchorage Bay observer rebroadcast the transmission to a NATO-wide channel. "We are flying blind." On Anchorage Bay's bridge, a runner brought a sealed order printed with the header that said, "For captain's eyes only." Mendoza intercepted it and laid it face down. Kathryn had seen it, but appreciated the plausible deniability that the order was not received. They didn't need to read it to know the order was to kill the broadcast. Every headquarters on the continent and the Pentagon heard Carter and Ghost Squadron. Someone on the channel demanded at least enable stealth, but the Pentagon was silent. In the silence, a junior officer muttered, "Fucking DC politicians." Carter cut in with an edge hard on her voice. "For whoever bricked our birds, we've all read the same intelligence reports. You know what the Russians intend to do to the people down there. Americans are down there too." Carter's words hit Kathryn hard. Everyone on the bridge knew someone down on the ground. Ghost Squadron rapidly approached the Suwalki Gap, daring the Pentagon to let them die. Kathryn thought to herself, "Come on, you've made your point. Now turn around and let the mechanics jury-rig overrides." "Fine. Fuck America. Our blood is on your hands." The words cut through the air. Kathryn burned in shame and resentment that America was not the same as her grandparents' generation. Another sealed order arrived. Mendoza stepped forward to intercept again, but Kathryn lifted her hand. "I'll take it." As she read the orders to go dark and withdraw, she felt him still at her shoulder, radiating tension. Kathryn thought to herself, "He's breaking." His eyes flicked toward the drone team, and she saw his jaw tighten, the muscles in his neck drawn taut. Then the words burst out, ragged with emotion. "Launch the Valkyries. Target their swarms. Fire now." The tactical crew froze, hands hovering over emergency keys, every gaze sliding to their captain. Kathryn lowered the paper, her voice like ice. "Belay that. The order is to go dark and withdraw." For one crazed heartbeat, Mendoza's hand twitched toward his sidearm. Marines readied their rifles, the master-at-arms poised to draw. Kathryn stepped in, unflinching, eyes locked on his. "Don't do it." The air grew heavy. No one moved, as if the ship itself held its breath. Mendoza shook, then let his arms fall. The master-at-arms stepped in and took his sidearm. Kathryn nodded once. "Master-at-arms, confine him to his quarters." As he was led away, Mendoza walked as if he were a shell. Glide bombs came in low and fast. hidden behind the horizon until the last seconds. A dense wave that struck exposed NATO positions within 30 seconds of detection. Ground radars could barely see them, but Anchorage Bay's tethered platform tracked every bomb. However, Washington had neutered the ship's alerts. The tactical nets thinned into static as people began to understand they were on their own. "Captain Chambers, General David Merrick is on the line," the comms officer said. Kathryn put him through. "Kathryn, I'm asking you to launch the Valkyries as a precaution." Kathryn looked at the comms officer for confirmation as his voice cracked as he stared at the feed. "NATO headquarters in Vilnius. It's gone. A direct strike by a glide bomb." Taking a moment to compose himself, the comms officer said, "Commander Mendoza's son was posted there." She remembered the day Mendoza's son graduated. The sun was harsh on her dress uniform, but Mendoza didn't notice, his face bright with pride as he listened to his son speaking of honor as the valedictorian of his class. Despite her nausea, her crew only saw her coolly say, "I know," the two words cut sharper than any order. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of cooling fans. Someone swore under their breath, another made the sign of the cross, and the hum of the consoles suddenly felt deafening. So Kathryn issued orders aware of the empty space where her executive officer should have been. The shocked bridge staff steadied into routine under her sheer force of will, but beneath that calm she trembled with fury at the betrayal. Kathryn bitterly thought, same old politics of keeping back essential aid from allies to force compliance. The same thing we did to the Ukrainians or the Kurds or the South Vietnamese. She decided she couldn't change the world, but she could save who she could. "Gunny Ramirez," Kathryn fixed the senior Marine with her gaze. "Aye, aye, ma'am." His reply was crisp, no hesitation. "Before we withdraw, engineering needs a full emergency inspection. While they're inside the well deck, your Marines will practice beach insertions. Treat it as live, supplies off, civilians on. You have 6 hours. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, 2045. 15 years later, the echoes of Blue Judas still haunted every posting she took. Trust was gone, but the Allied framework endured, and Kathryn fought each day to hold it together. Her pre-dawn run traced the curve of the harbor, the air heavy with salt and jet fuel. The water was calm, its surface unbroken, but for the slow rise of patrol wakes. She timed her breathing to the rhythm of the lights along the quay. Each lap a quiet rehearsal of discipline and memory. Back in her quarters, she straightened her jacket. A quiet pride stirring at the 3 stars on her collar. Kathryn mused, "I wish my father saw this." Composed again, she walked into the morning briefing. Everyone stood as she entered, but Kathryn lifted a hand. "At ease." She crossed to her place at the table and sat as the deputy commander of Indo-Pacific Command while her boss, Admiral Han, was meeting with the CIA to discuss Mina Star. His chief of staff, Kaya Torres, led the briefing. A tall, broad-shouldered woman with close-cropped gray hair, she always carried herself with quiet, practical authority. Each service branch efficiently provided updates, and after Pacific Fleet's update, Kathryn asked, "Admiral Ellison, how is the high-altitude mesh network holding up? Are we ready for another Kessler cascade?" The Pacific Fleet's Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Marcus Ellison, was a lean, sharp-eyed officer with a runner's build, close-cropped blonde hair with a perpetual squint, as if measuring every detail in the room. "Yes, ma'am. The high-altitude platforms are solid. No breaks in drone telemetry. Undersea and surface drones give us better fidelity than satellites. If the eyes in the sky go blind again, we're ready." Kathryn nodded. "And does it keep cargo moving?" Marcus shook his head. "Outside my lane, ma'am." Commodore Jeremiah Hayashi, a short, plump man in his late 50s, spoke up. "As a last resort backbone, we've worked with the cargo carriers and insurers to keep freight flowing, leaving high frequency clear for fleet use." Kathryn felt satisfied at the Indo-Pacific Command's performance. After the briefing room cleared, Pacific Fleet Admiral Jonathan Reeves entered, tall and heavy-set with the weight of his authority filling the space. He drew Kathryn aside. "The Secretary of Defense wants us in Tokyo for an Allied briefing. It's about security concerns over Mina Star." Wheels up in 1 hour. Kathryn mentally steadied herself as the world tilted beneath her again, just as it had on the morning of Blue Judas. Tokyo, Japan. 2045. The rain hammered against the windows of Yokota Air Base in western Tokyo. Admiral Richard Hahn, Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, flickered onto the secure feed from Washington. Rain streaked the glass behind the Admiral's image, but his tone was polished, every word deliberate. "We'll begin with Mirov Enterprises," Hahn said. "Our assessment is that Alexander has, in practice, gained effective control of the company and through it, the KFE ecosystem, what's branded as the charter movement. That assessment leans on financial traces routed through Mikhail's chief of staff, which also provided the seed funding for Lena Barakat, a former Mirov Enterprise executive." He paused, eyes steady on the camera. After the Arcology merger and through affiliates, Mirov-linked entities now hold perhaps a quarter of the KFE stake. Lena has historically refrained from exercising her founder's share, which leaves Mirov carrying nearly all decisions. Effective control was previously masked. The question is, why make it public now? Brigadier General Elaine Marks, Defense Attaché, U.S. Embassy Tokyo, turned a page and snorted. Freedom of movement, knowledge for everyone, exile over execution. Her cropped steel-gray hair barely shifted as she shook her head. Those slogans bought Mirov influence where wealth closed doors. They dressed it as a human rights movement, but in practice it bound populations to his system. Every life sovereign, only so long as you stayed inside the cage. Admiral Hahn signaled to Colonel Samuel Ortega, the Pearl Harbor DIA liaison. "Red team?" Ortega carried himself with the restless focus of a man who had spent years in the field before trading mud for briefing rooms. Lean and sharp-eyed, he spoke in a clipped tone. 3 board members are public, but indications point to 7 to 10 in total. Dimitra Arvani is suspected among them. The Mirov family may have immense wealth and influence, but they are first among equals. It is not absolute, and at times their reign is contested. Board dissension may moderate Mirov Enterprises' influence over KFE. Urbane and calm, Lisa Harrington, CIA Chief of Station Tokyo, nodded at the Red Team counterpoint. "We are certain of what Mirov Enterprises and the Charter have done. What we do not yet understand is why. To endure, we must strengthen our alliances." Politically well-connected, she spoke with the certainty of knowing her words would reach the president unfiltered. Mirov arcologies and charter member states do not just cover half the globe, with nearly 1 billion people moving freely within their network. Unlike China's rise, this bloc is built on choke points such as the Northwest Passage, both gates of the Panama Canal, Somaliland at the Red Sea, and the infrastructure of space. It is a movement with no natural boundary to contain it, hollowing out cities around the world. Kathryn remembered how, over the years, her hometown of Houston felt leaner as people left to join the charter. Kathryn fiercely thought to herself, for 20 years, the media have called America's isolation from the world stage the Second Ming Retreat. But we are a new generation, and we will revive the American dream. Yet Kathryn felt an icy doubt that perhaps it was already too late. Lisa Harrington paused, her tone sharpening. "Now add a constellation of stealth satellites, and you have a non-nuclear first strike capability that strips away the old balance of deterrence. We let this build while we were distracted for 20 years, and our allies moved on. No more. The president has been clear. Our job is to rebuild American power through strong alliances. The goal of this meeting is consensus as the first step toward renewed global leadership." After the briefing, as the principals mingled, Elaine Marks drifted to Kathryn's side and pressed a slim, ribbon-tied leather box into her hand. "Congratulations on the 3rd star," she said lightly. With a knowing smile, she added, "Remember the blue star we spotted on our first night navigation mission as cadets? You fed the fish before anyone else." Kathryn's pulse ticked faster. The ribbon was cadet blue, which was our agreed warning signal. Whatever Elaine meant, the message had to be in the gift. Elaine, ever the sly fox, loved hiding her warnings in clever wrappings. Later that day, the cedar room was built for diplomacy. Polished wood gleamed beneath soft orange light, and the carpet was thick enough to swallow footsteps, carrying a faint trace of cedar and wax. At the center stretched a long oval table of burnished oak, with consoles inlaid so discreetly they seemed part of the grain. Cushioned seats lined the edges for senior aides. The acoustics were tuned with care, so that natural speech carried clearly without effort. At the head of the table sat Alvaro Serrano, the newly promoted EIC director. His bearing suggested politician more than field officer. His suit was cut like armor, every seam sharp and every gesture deliberate. To his right sat two intelligence officers. One was Lucien Vey, known in the DIA briefings as Vellum's handler. He leaned back slightly, watchful even in this secure setting, the ruin of his ears stark under the warm light. Beside him sat Matthias Wendt, silver-haired and rigid, a man ill at ease with the new order. The briefing had noted his rivalry with Serrano, and now, relegated to his staff, he looked every bit the diminished rival. Alvaro gave a nod for Lucien to begin. Vellum, a deep cover asset, recently signaled Valence 9. Vellum gained access to Mirov's most secure archives, a vast repository built over decades and enriched by diligence files from acquisition activity. What Vellum uncovered was that each of the major collapses since 2026 was engineered by a small group calling themselves the Compact. They came together after the nuclear strike on Chicago and the Baltic invasion, driven by the world's indifference. A flicker of unease moved through the room. Kathryn caught sharp silences and tight jaws at the memory of Blue Judas. Eyes shifted toward the American contingent. Chicago first, then appeasement. They triggered the failed invasion of Taiwan in a bid to seize the semiconductor industry after the wreckage of China's and Taiwan's economies. The $2,032 crash was engineered to replace it with the Euro and KFE. The Kessler Cascade of 2034 was set off to blind the world to deep space threats. All of it built toward the final goal of destroying all strategic nuclear armaments and tritium production around the world. Murmurs rose around the table, and Kathryn's stomach churned. We reap what we sow, she thought, tasting the bitter fruit of Blue Judas. The goal of Mikhail Mirov, born Arvo Kask, is to free the world from what he calls the unbridled tyranny of the nuclear powers. His son's goal is simpler. He intends to replace that power with his own, Kathryn thought for a moment. What are the implications of Mirov arcologies joining the charter movement? Why reveal now what they worked so hard to hide? Vice Admiral Rika Sato of the Japanese delegation, a compact and controlled woman, glanced at General Park Hyun-woo of South Korea, who held himself rigidly as they remained silent. Their nations had been left intensely vulnerable by American tariffs, by rapidly aging populations, and by the contagion that followed the economic collapse of Taiwan and China. In desperation, they turned to the same unpalatable solution. They allowed charter arcologies to be built as a tax base, while avoiding the political suicide of mass immigration. Air Commodore Lachlan Reed of Australia snapped, his voice hard, the kind that carried years of restrained fury. "What are you saying, American? You know damn well what the Charter has done in the past 20 years while you abandoned us to a world on fire. They gave people fleeing human rights abusers and failed states a place to go. They were treated with dignity, not the prove you are a refugee UNHCR rigmarole, not the slow, miserable death handed to Palestinians." Scoffs rippled at the mention of the old United Nations, abandoned and discredited. The Charter cut global violence. China, Turkmenistan, and North Korea eventually emptied their political prisons. It was cheaper to exile people and regain access to stable and prosperous trade, without the vague name and shame campaigns that once drove capricious boycotts and sanctions. The ones who stayed are the ones who chose to. Charter states have grown rapidly. The KFE coin put a floor under how fucking bad life can get. And you stand here and tell us this is just a Mirov ruse? By the end, Reed was on his feet, fingers stabbing the air, his voice rising until he was shouting at the American delegation. The Americans shifted. jaw tightening, but before the Americans could respond, Rear Admiral Genevieve Trudeau of Canada touched Reed's arm. The charter is too big for anyone to control. If Mirov Enterprises tried to rig the coin, users would just fork it. Mirov could keep their stake, but lose the people. Freedom of movement applies to the coin as much as to the cities. No. Mirov joined the charter for cover on Mina Star, not for control. Author's note. This novel began as a response to two troubling global trends. The first is the growing comfort with nuclear appeasement. The second is the steady rise of global political violence. Through this story, I wanted to explore the dangers of both while offering a possible path forward through the idea of the Charter, a political framework built to redefine what a state can be. This book is the first in a planned 9-part series. The first trilogy begins in a near-future world grounded in realism and science, and its later volumes move beyond Earth to the cloud cities of Venus and the scavenger worlds of dead civilizations where technology has become indistinguishable from magic. The second trilogy carries these ideas into a fantasy realm. The third trilogy unites both universes into one. The Charter and its principles form the through line of the entire series, expressed in its central creed. Every life is sovereign. If you have listened this far, thank you. Please consider liking or subscribing to help this story and its message reach more people.